We're going to discuss the differences between a film studio and a production company. There's one or two ways a movie or television show can be made. You can either produce it yourself or a studio could produce it. When you say the word film studio, most people think about the physical location of where television and TV shows are recorded. I might be aging myself, but remember when we watched sitcoms as kids and we would hear
filmed in front of a live studio audience?
Yeah, that's what we were thinking about. And while that is in fact a studio, we also use the word studio to refer to the entertainment company that controls all aspects of production and distribution of a television or film project, right? So they are going to see the entire project from beginning to end, and you can think of them kind of as like the mothership of filmmaking, if you will. They'll own the worldwide rights to a project as well as control the revenue that's generated from its distributions. So even if you're not super like film and TV savvy, you've likely heard of the 5 major studios, right? Walt Disney Studios, Paramount Pictures, Sony Pictures, Universal Pictures, as well as Warner Brothers. So in order to understand studios as well as their relationship to production companies, let's go back in time and talk some film history. During the 1920s, film was really popping off. Like the era between the 20s and the mid to late 40s was what we all considered the Hollywood golden era, golden age, if you will. Film studios were literally impenetrable. They had vertical integration and they controlled every single aspect of filmmaking. Not only did they fund projects, but they would develop them, and not just develop them in the sense that we understand it today, but they would also develop talent. Talent was on their payroll as employees, the way that a Google employee would be on Google's payroll and therefore cannot render services as an Apple employee. That is completely different from how things are today. I'll use an example from one of my favorite movies, Gone with the Wind.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
Clark Gable, he was signed as an employee to MGM Studios, meaning he could not render services for any other Hollywood studio at the time. This is so much different from, let's take Chris Pratt, who has rendered services for Marvel in Guardians. He has done Super Mario Brothers, and I think that was distributed by Warner Brothers, Jurassic Park, Universal, etc. So they controlled every single aspect. And most notably, they did the last thing here, which is exhibit. They had their own movie theaters. And so they controlled what movies were being seen. And in so many ways, and you're probably thinking it, which is great, yeah, that's an antitrust violation. Yep, because they had an entire monopoly on what films were being exhibited and when. A really good visual representation of this old Hollywood system is a television show on Netflix. I want to say it's from like 2021, but it's called Hollywood. So you can actually visually see all of these things in play because it takes place during that era. In 1948, this exact issue was brought before the U.S. Supreme Court. Guys, I'm a lawyer. We have to talk about the law a little bit. The Supreme Court's decision ultimately prohibited these studios from exhibiting their own films. These were known as the Paramount Decrees, and this is what governed studios' behaviors for what, 70 plus years, up until 2020 when this was repealed. One of the arguments for repealing the law was that you had competitors such as Netflix, Amazon, and Apple who were not essentially bound by these rulings, right? They did not fall within their guise or purview because they were technically not studios, but instead tech companies that were just producing their own content. And so they were able to compete in a way that the studios did not.
It's not there.
They were able to exclusively produce their content as well as exclusively stream it on their own platforms. So this is repealed in 2020, which takes us to what are studios now? What do they look like? What are their main functions? A film and television studio has 4 main functions. They fund, produce, market, and distribute a product, that product being a film or television show. Because we are referring to the studio as the entertainment company, they have a more bird's eye view as to the entire process from beginning to end. As we see here in the second bucket here, they can produce, and the way that studios produce is either via their own studio affiliated production company, or they will engage an independent production company and work in partnership with them. So what does a production company actually even do? The main functions of a production company are to produce and deliver. In the production bucket, they are essentially handling all of the day-to-day, bringing the project literally to life. This is a more boots on the ground kind of approach, ant's eye view, having way more creative controls and actually creating the project. But in the second bucket, they have to deliver it. Production companies do not have distribution arms, and so they have to rely on a third-party distributor to get their product out to the masses. Who's going to see their amazing project if it's not distributed? They deliver it either to a distributor, which could be the studio, or a distribution company, and that company could be someone like an A24. So as I stated before, a film or television pilot could be independently produced or studio produced via an affiliate or a partnership. So let's jump into independent production. In this scenario, an independent filmmaker will do all of the financing and producing of the film, whether that's via crowdfunding or actual financing, whatever the case may be. They will produce the project from beginning to end. They will then take that final work product and say, hey, how do I get it out to the masses? And that's when they need to rely on a distributor. Think about Sundance, for example, and all these other film festivals. During that film festival circuit, that is exactly what the independently produced projects are looking for. They just want a home, whether that is via a sale at a Sundance or working with a film aggregator who can kind of help get your product on like a Tubi or a Hulu. A project that is produced at a studio will happen in one or two ways: a studio affiliate or a subsidiary. Oftentimes, studios will go off and create their own production entities to bring the project to life, in which case the studio themselves are going to handle the day-to-day, the boots on the ground. They will also sometimes work in partnership with an independent production company. So let's think about Shonda Rhimes and Shondaland. Shondaland is one of those independent production companies that works in partnership with a major studio. We've seen her do it with ABC, on Grey's, as well as Netflix for Bridgerton. We've only scratched the surface as it pertains to studios and production companies, but these are the basics. The biggest distinction between a studio and a production company is often oversight, having a bird's eye view versus a ant's eye view. There's more support, more financial resources, more guarantees, but there may also be less creative controls. Studios are often a part of larger publicly held companies, and so there's way more politics, way more bureaucracy, and answering the shareholders that happens. But that's it for today. Join me next week when we talk about another topic in entertainment.